Today we're diving into 5 absolutely chilling stories from the first week of school. These aren't your typical forgot my homework nightmares. No, these are the kind of experiences that leave students questioning reality itself. So grab your headphones, turn down the lights, and let's begin with our first story. Story 1. The Welcome Back Assembly. Subsistus. This story comes from Madison, a sophomore at Riverside High in Oregon. It was her first day at a new school after her family moved over the summer, and she was already nervous about fitting in. But nothing could have prepared her for what happened during the Welcome Back Assembly. Madison walked into the packed auditorium that Tuesday morning, scanning for an empty seat. The principal, Mrs. Henderson, took the stage with an unusually wide smile. "Welcome back, students," she announced, "and welcome to our new students joining the Riverside family." Madison felt a chill when Mrs. Henderson's eyes seemed to lock directly onto hers from across the crowded room. But that wasn't the strange part yet. Mrs. Henderson continued her speech, talking about school spirit, new policies, the usual first week announcements. But then she said something that made Madison's blood run cold. Dropping voice, more serious. "And remember, students, here at Riverside High, we take attendance very seriously. We know exactly who belongs here and who doesn't." Madison thought it was an odd way to phrase it, but she shrugged it off. That's when she noticed the girl sitting 3 seats down from her. The girl had long, dark hair covering most of her face, wearing a faded blue dress that looked like it was from decades ago. Madison couldn't shake the feeling that something was off about her. The girl never moved. Not once. Not to applaud. Not to shift in her seat. Nothing. After the assembly, Madison tried to catch up with the mysterious girl, but she had vanished into the crowd. Curious, Madison approached a group of students near the doors. "Hey," she said, "do you know that girl in the blue dress? Long dark hair." The students exchanged confused glances. "What girl?" one of them asked. Madison described her in detail, but their faces remained blank. There wasn't anyone sitting in that section wearing a blue dress, another student insisted. "I was right behind there, trust me." That night, Madison couldn't stop thinking about it. She decided to do some research about her new school. What she found in the local newspaper archives made her stomach drop. 23 years ago, a student named Rebecca Mills had died in a car accident on her way to the first day of school at Riverside High. He was wearing a blue dress her mother had bought specially for the occasion. The newspaper included a photograph. It was the same girl Madison had seen in the auditorium. But here's where it gets even stranger. Madison decided to ask Mrs. Henderson about it the next day. When she described what she'd seen, the principal's face went completely pale. You saw her too," Mrs. Henderson whispered, glancing around to make sure no one else was listening. "Two?" Madison asked, confused and frightened, her voice barely audible. Mrs. Henderson closed her office door. "Rebecca appears every year during the first week. Only some students can see her. The ones who can, they're usually the ones who need to pay attention to what she's trying to tell them." Madison never found out what Rebecca was trying to communicate, but she did notice something else. Every student who claimed to see Rebecca that first week ended up transferring schools before the year was over. Every single one. Madison lasted until October. Correct and distant.
This
Story 2, The Substitute Teacher. Shifting to a more unsettling tone, our second story comes from Jake, a junior at Maple Grove Academy in Massachusetts. Jake was the kind of student who never caused trouble, always showed up on time, and definitely paid attention in class, which is why what happened in his AP history course still haunts him to this day. It was Thursday of the first week, and their regular teacher, Mr. Rodriguez, was apparently out sick. The substitute was a tall, thin man who introduced himself as Mr. Ashford. He had an unusual appearance, very pale skin, dark circles under his eyes, and an old-fashioned way of speaking that seemed out of place, building unease. "Today, class," Mr. Ashford announced in a voice that seemed to echo strangely in the room, "we'll be discussing a rather intimate period of local history." He began teaching about events that had supposedly happened in their town during the 1800s. But these weren't events from any textbook Jake had ever seen. Mr. Ashford spoke in vivid detail about mysterious disappearances, unexplained deaths, and strange rituals that allegedly took place in the very building where their school now stood. "In 1847, Mr. Ashford continued, his voice taking on an eerie quality, 13 students from the original schoolhouse simply vanished one October evening. They were found 3 days later in the basement, but they were never quite the same." Jake looked around the classroom. His classmates seemed entranced, hanging on every word, but something felt deeply wrong. The temperature in the room seemed to be dropping, and Jake swore he could see his breath. Then Mr. Ashford did something that made Jake's skin crawl. He started calling out names from the class roster, but they weren't the names of any students Jake recognized. "William Thompson?" he called. A boy Jake knew as Marcus raised his hand. "Sarah Elizabeth?" A girl named Amy responded. Confused and frightened, Jake realized that Mr. Ashford was calling out what sounded like old-fashioned versions of their names, and somehow everyone was responding as if it were perfectly normal. When the bell rang, Jake hurried to his next class. He immediately asked his friend Sarah, "What did you think of that substitute in history?" She looked at him blankly. "What substitute? Mr. Rodriguez was there the whole time." Jake felt his heart racing. "No, the pale guy, Mr. Ashford. He was talking about kids disappearing in the 1800s. But Sarah insisted that Mr. Rodriguez had taught a normal lesson about the Civil War. When Jake asked other students from the class, they all said the same thing. Desperate for answers, Jake went to the principal's office and asked to speak with Mr. Ashford. The secretary looked confused. "I'm sorry, but we don't have any substitute teacher by that name scheduled, and Mr. Rodriguez was never absent this week." That night, Jake couldn't sleep. He decided to research the school's history online. What he found made his hands shake as he read. In 1923, there had indeed been a teacher at the original Maple Grove School named Jonathan Ashford. He had been arrested for unspeakable things involving his students. He died in prison in 1925, but not before claiming that he would return to finish his lessons. The really disturbing part? The 13 students who had disappeared in 1847, according to Mr. Ashford's lesson. Those names matched exactly with the names that had been called out in class, just modernized. Jake never figured out what happened that day, but he did notice something else. Every student who had been in that classroom with him started having the same recurring nightmare, being trapped in an old schoolhouse basement while a pale man in old-fashioned clothes taught lessons that would never end. The nightmares continued for the rest of the school year. Story 3. The New Student. This third story is perhaps the most disturbing one I've received, and it comes from Emma, a senior at Westfield High in Colorado. Emma was excited about her first week of high school, looking forward to senior year and all the memories she'd make. But she gained one memory she'd give anything to forget. On Wednesday morning, Emma noticed a new student in her first period English class. The girl introduced herself as Lily Chen, and she seemed nice enough, quiet, polite, with long black hair that she kept in a neat braid down her back. What struck Emma as odd was how perfect Lily seemed. Growing suspicion. Her handwriting was flawless. She knew all the answers to every question, and she had this strange way of finishing people's sentences before they could speak. During lunch, Emma decided to introduce herself properly. She found Lily sitting alone, reading what looked like an old leather-bound book.
Hey, I'm Emma. Welcome to Westfield.
Lily looked up and smiled, but her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. Thank you, Emma. I've been looking forward to meeting you. Looking forward to meeting me? Emma asked, confused because that seemed like an odd thing to say to someone you'd never met. Oh, Lily said. I just meant meeting new people in general. But as they talked, Lily revealed that she knew things about Emma she shouldn't know. Building unease. She knew Emma's favorite coffee shop, her cat's name, even the fact that Emma had broken her arm in 3rd grade. When Emma asked how she knew these things, Lily just smiled mysteriously and said, "Cryptic, you mentioned them before." But Emma was certain she hadn't. Over the next few days, Lily appeared in more and more of Emma's classes, which was strange because Emma was taking mostly AP and honors courses, and she was pretty sure she would have remembered signing up with someone who knew so much about her personal life. The breaking point came on Friday. Emma was running late and rushed into her calculus class only to find Lily already sitting in Emma's usual seat. "Hey, sorry, but that's actually my seat," Emma said politely. Lily looked up, and for just a moment, her expression was completely different. Cold, almost angry. "No, Emma," she said in a voice that seemed to come from somewhere else entirely. "This is my seat. It's always been my seat." Emma looked around the classroom confused. Her classmates were staring at her like she was causing a scene. "But I've sat there all week." "Emma," her teacher, Ms. Rodriguez, interrupted, concerned. "Lily has been sitting there all semester. Are you feeling all right?" "All semester? But it was only the first week of school." Emma tried to explain, but everyone in the class insisted that Lily had been there since the beginning of the year. That afternoon, Emma went to the guidance counselor's office and asked to see Lily's enrollment records. After some convincing, the counselor pulled up the files. According to the system, Lily Chen had been enrolled at Westfield High for 3 years. Her student ID photo showed the same girl, but the picture was dated from Emma's sophomore year. But Emma distinctly remembered seeing Lily for the first time just 4 days ago. Desperate and scared, Emma decided to dig deeper. She started asking longtime students about Lily. The responses she got made her question her own sanity. "Oh, Lily Chen," students would say. "Yeah, she's been here forever. Super smart, kind of quiet. You two been classes together since sophomore year." But Emma had no memory of this. None at all. She went through her old yearbooks, and there was Lily in photos from every year. In some of them, she was standing right next to Emma, smiling that same not quite right smile. The most terrifying part? Emma found her own diary entries from previous years mentioning Lily. Reading with growing dread. Entries she had no memory of writing, describing a friendship she had no memory of having. The last entry, dated just 3 months earlier, sent chills down Emma's spine. Voice shaking. I'm starting to forget who I was before I met Lily. Sometimes I wonder if I ever existed at all, or if I'm just becoming her. Emma never figured out what was happening to her, but she did start noticing other things. When she looked in mirrors, sometimes she saw Lily's reflection instead of her own. Her handwriting was slowly changing to match Lily's perfect script. And worst of all, she was starting to know things about Lily's life as if they were her own memories. By October, Emma's friends started expressing concern. You've been acting strange lately, they would say. You don't seem like yourself. Emma would laugh it off, but deep down she was terrified because she was starting to forget who herself was supposed to be. The last anyone heard from Emma was a text message sent to her mother in November. Robotic, emotionless. Don't worry about me. I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. Lily. Emma's mother insists she never had a daughter named Lily. But according to all the school records, Lily Chen has been a student at Westfield High for 4 years running, and she's never missed a single day. Story 4. The Locked Door. Building to more intense horror. Our fourth story comes from twin brothers Alex and Ethan, freshmen at Roosevelt High in Illinois. Being identical twins, they were used to people mixing them up, but they had never experienced anything like what happened during their first week of high school. It started on Monday when they were exploring their new school during lunch. Curious exploration. Roosevelt High was old, built in the 1960s with long corridors and countless doors. Most were clearly marked: classrooms, storage, offices. But at the end of the East Wing's 3rd floor, they found something unusual. A door with no number, no nameplate, just painted the same institutional green as the walls. What caught their attention was the heavy-duty lock, not the standard school locks, but something that looked like it belonged on a bank vault. Wonder what's in there? Alex whispered to his brother. Ethan shrugged. Probably just old equipment or something. But they both felt drawn to that door in a way they couldn't explain. Every day that week, they found excuses to walk past it. The door seemed to call to them, and they started having the same recurring dream. Standing in front of that door, hearing voices calling their names from the other side. On Thursday, something changed. As they walked past during their study hall, they heard it. Voices, real voices, coming from behind the door, whispering their names. Alex. Ethan. The voices were young, like children, but there was something desperate about them. The brothers looked at each other, neither wanting to admit what they were hearing. But when they pressed their ears to the door, the voices became clearer. Help us, please. We've been waiting so long. Alex and Ethan ran to find a teacher, any teacher. They found Mr. Williams, the chemistry teacher, in his classroom. Mr. Williams, Alex gasped. There's something wrong with the room at the end of the east wing. We heard voices. Kids asking for help. Mr. Williams's face went completely white. Shock. He sat down heavily in his chair, staring at the two boys as if he'd seen ghosts. You heard them? He whispered, confused. You know about this? Ethan asked. Mr. Williams was quiet for a long moment. Then he walked to his classroom door, looked both ways down the hallway, and closed it. Conspiratorial. What I'm about to tell you doesn't leave this room. Do you understand? The boys nodded, terrified of what they were about to learn. Grave. That room has been locked for 15 years. In 2009, during renovation work, 3 students somehow got trapped inside during a fire drill. By the time anyone realized they were missing, he paused. They found them 3 days later. The official cause of death was dehydration. But what? Alex whispered. Haunted. The strange thing was, the door had been locked from the outside. Heavy-duty locks that could only be engaged from the hallway. And the security cameras from that day, they showed the 3 students walking toward that door, but they never showed anyone locking it behind them. Mr. Williams continued, growing more disturbed. Even stranger, the students who died. They were triplets, identical triplets. Just like you two are identical twins. The boys felt their blood turn to ice. What were their names? Ethan asked, though he was afraid of the answer. Grim. Alexander, Ethan, and Alina Morrison. Alex and Ethan stared at each other in horror. Their names. The voices behind the door had been calling their names. Every few years, Mr. Williams continued, students report hearing voices from that room, always twins or triplets, always with names similar to the Morrison children, and they always say they feel drawn to that door, building to climax. That night, neither Alex nor Ethan could sleep. They kept hearing the voices, calling to them even from miles away at home. At 3 a.m., Alex woke up to find Ethan's bed empty. Panicking, Alex called his brother's cell phone. It rang from somewhere in the house. Ethan had left it behind. Alex woke up his parents and they searched everywhere, but Ethan was gone. At sunrise, Alex insisted they check the school. They found Ethan standing in front of the locked door, his eyes closed, his hand pressed against the metal surface. "Ethan!" Alex shouted, relieved but terrified, but his brother didn't respond. He seemed to be in some kind of trance, and they finally managed to wake him. Ethan had no memory of how he got there. "I was sleeping," he insisted. "I was dreaming about Elena." "Who's Elena?" his mother asked. Alex felt his stomach drop. Elena. The 3rd Morrison child, the sister. Over the next few weeks, both boys started experiencing sleepwalking episodes, always ending up at that door. They would stand there for hours, having conversations with someone no one else could see. Their parents eventually transferred them to a different school, but it didn't help. Every night they felt the pull. Every night they heard Elena Morrison calling to them, begging them to come back. "She's so lonely," Ethan would say during his waking hours. "She just wants her brothers back." The last I heard from the family, they had moved across the country. But Alex reports that no matter how far they go, they can still hear Elena calling to them in their dreams, promising that someday they'll all be together again, just like they were always meant to be. Story 5. The School Photo. final story, most intense. Our final and most disturbing story comes from Chloe, a junior at Millfield Academy in Vermont. Of all the stories I've received, this one has kept me awake the most nights because, unlike the others, this one has physical evidence that no one can explain. Setting normal scene. It was picture day during the first week of school and Chloe was excited. She had gotten a new haircut over the summer and felt confident about her junior year photos. The process was routine. Stand in line, wait your turn, smile for the camera, move on. But when Chloe got her individual photos back 2 weeks later, something was very, very wrong. In every single photo, standing directly behind her, was a boy she had never seen before. He appeared to be about her age, with messy brown hair and an old-fashioned school uniform that definitely wasn't part of Millfield's dress code. His face was pale, almost translucent, and his eyes seemed to be looking directly at the camera with an expression of desperate sadness. Chloe was certain no one had been standing behind her during the photo session. She remembered the photographer telling her to step forward, to make sure she was centered, to smile. There had been no one else in the frame. She took the photos to her friends, seeking validation, asking if they could see the boy in the pictures. They all confirmed it. He was clearly there, standing right behind her, but none of them remembered seeing him on picture day. Concerned, Chloe went to the photography company that had taken the school photos. Professional, the photographer, Mrs. Patterson, was friendly but became visibly uncomfortable when she saw Chloe's prints. Don't understand, Mrs. Patterson stammered, confused and frightened, examining the photos with a magnifying glass.
These aren't doctored. The film grain, the lighting, the shadows. He's really there in the original photograph, but I swear to you, there was no one standing behind you when I took these pictures.
Mrs. Patterson pulled out the original negatives, and there he was on every single frame. The mysterious boy, captured on film, clear as day. Has this ever happened before? Chloe asked. Mrs. Patterson hesitated, then nodded slowly.
Twice in the past 5 years, both times at your school. Both times the student in the photo had no memory of anyone standing behind them.
What happened to those students? Chloe whispered. Mrs. Patterson's face went pale. They both transferred schools before the end of the year, said they couldn't handle the nightmares. That night, Chloe did what any modern teenager would do. She posted the photos on social media, asking if anyone knew who the boy was. The responses she got were not what she expected. Several older students from her school messaged her privately. Revelation. They all said the same thing. They had seen that boy before in their dreams, always wearing the same old-fashioned uniform, always looking sad and lost. One senior, Marcus, sent her a particularly chilling message.
I've been dreaming about him since freshman year. He never speaks, just stands there looking at me like he's trying to tell me something. I call him Thomas because he looks like a Thomas. Be careful, Chloe. The dreams get worse.
Curious and terrified, Chloe decided to research her school's history.
Research mode.
What she found in the local library archives made her hands shake as she read. In 1952, a student named Thomas Whitmore had died in a tragic accident at Millfield Academy. He had fallen down the main staircase and broken his neck. But here's the disturbing part. According to the newspaper reports, Thomas had been alone in the school after hours, but several witnesses claimed to have seen him talking to someone just before the fall, someone who was never identified. The photograph in the newspaper showed a boy with messy brown hair wearing the school uniform from that era. Chilling realization. It was unmistakably the same boy from Chloe's school photos. But the story got stranger. Chloe found records indicating that Thomas Whitmore had never actually been enrolled as a student at Millfield Academy. According to official school records, no student by that name had ever attended the school. Yet the newspaper clearly reported his death as a Millfield student. It was as if Thomas existed only in the space between life and documentation, trapped in moments that couldn't quite be verified or explained. That's when the dreams started. Every night, Chloe found herself in the old version of her school, walking through hallways that looked similar but somehow different. And there was Thomas, always just ahead of her, turning corners just as she approached, climbing stairs just out of reach. In the dreams, she could hear him calling her name, but his voice seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. Chloe, help me. I can't find my way. Growing desperation. The dreams became more vivid, more real. Chloe would wake up with dirt on her feet, as if she had actually been walking through the old school hallways. Her parents found her sleepwalking several times, always moving toward the front door, as if trying to get somewhere. But the most terrifying part was what happened during her waking hours. Chloe started seeing Thomas everywhere at school, in reflections in windows, standing at the end of hallways, sitting in empty classrooms, always watching, always trying to communicate something she couldn't understand. Other students began reporting similar sightings. The school counselor started seeing more students than usual, all complaining of disturbing dreams about a boy in an old-fashioned uniform. 3 weeks after the photos were taken, Chloe made a discovery that changed everything. She was cleaning out her grandmother's attic when she found a box of old photographs from the 1950s. Her grandmother had attended Millfield Academy decades ago, and there, in a group photo from 1952, was Thomas Whitmore. But he wasn't alone. Standing right next to him, smiling and alive, was Chloe's grandmother as a teenager. Confrontation. When Chloe showed the photograph to her grandmother, the elderly woman's face went completely white. "Where did you get this?" she whispered, her hands trembling as she held the old photograph. Chloe explained about her school photos, about the dreams, about Thomas. Her grandmother listened in silence, tears streaming down her face. Finally she spoke. Confession. "Thomas was my boyfriend in high school, but he died so long ago. I tried to forget about him, tried to move on, but..." "But what, Grandma?" "Before he died, he promised he would find a way back to me. He said death couldn't keep us apart. I thought it was just young love, you know. The dramatic things teenagers say." Chloe's grandmother paused, looking at the photo again. "But you look exactly like I did at your age. Maybe he's been waiting all these years and he thinks you're me." Resolution attempt. Together, Chloe and her grandmother returned to Millfield Academy that night. They found Thomas's memorial plaque hidden in a forgotten corner of the school's basement. It had been placed there by Chloe's grandmother herself over 60 years ago. Her grandmother knelt by the plaque and spoke to Thomas directly, explaining that she had lived a full life, that she had loved again, that it was time for him to let go. That night, Chloe had one final dream. Thomas appeared to her, but this time he was smiling. He looked younger somehow, more at peace. He handed her something, an old-fashioned class ring, and spoke for the first time in her dreams. "Tell her," he said in a voice like wind through autumn leaves. "Tell her I understand. And tell her thank you for remembering me." When Chloe woke up, the ring was on her nightstand. Real, solid, engraved with the initials TW and the date, 1952. She gave it to her grandmother, who wept as she held it. Closure. "I threw this in the pond behind the school the day after his funeral," she whispered. "I couldn't bear to keep it." Chloe never had another dream about Thomas Whitmore. But sometimes, when she walks through the halls of Millfield Academy, she catches a glimpse of someone in her peripheral vision. Someone who waves goodbye before disappearing around the corner. Finally, at peace. The school photos from that year were the last time Thomas ever appeared in a picture at Millfield Academy. But Chloe kept one of those photos, and sometimes she swears she can see him smiling. So there you have it. 5 stories from the first week of school that prove sometimes the most terrifying experiences aren't found in horror movies, but in the hallways and classrooms where we spend our most formative years. I told it. What strikes me about all these stories is how they blur the line between memory and reality, between what we think we know and what might actually be true. Schools are places of transition, of becoming, and maybe, just maybe, they're also places where the past refuses to let go of the present. If you've had your own supernatural school experiences, I'd love to hear about them. Send your stories to the email in the description below. Who knows? Your story might be featured in our next episode. Final warning. Until then, remember, when you're walking through those school hallways, pay attention to who's walking with you, because sometimes the most important lessons aren't found in textbooks. They're whispered by voices that shouldn't exist, in places that shouldn't be possible, by people who should have graduated a very long time ago. Thanks for watching, Mr. Abyss. Sleep well, if you can. In the future, the charge absurd, the par individual.